series at Rio Bravo. And today we have Art Berger, who's going to be lecturing. Art owns the Center Gallery Fine Art that's at the corner of Foch and Main. And he wants us all to know that he chose to move here from Santa Fe, and he's never regretted it. So here's Art.
I didn't choose to move from Santa Fe, I escaped Santa Fe. And I left all the Texans in my wake.
I couldn't afford it.
Oh, well, that's
why I had to leave.
that was well on its way. So, first of all, thank you all for coming. I'm very much honored to be asked to join and present at this fairly illustrious event. I've attended several myself, and I would say in my early years came to know quite a bit about the art community from the presenters here. So I really thank you all for coming. When Rebecca asked me to do this, I said, what do you want me to talk about? And she said, talk about how you got into art. And I said, well, I guess I'd have to blame my folks, because they named me Art. I want to share with you today a little bit about how I came to art and how I ultimately ended up here. And the story really has to begin with my folks. You know, they always say as you get older, your folks get smarter. Early on, it was obvious to me and to my siblings that my folks had quite the story. So Mom was born in Brooklyn Heights. She's a Kennedy. She was born to a Kennedy family and DAR eligible. She always said she wanted nothing to do with those blue-haired ladies anyway. But she pretty much grew up in decent, well-off means in Brooklyn. Dad was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania, to an German immigrant father. So my father was the first German-American in our family, and I'm a second-generation German-American. He lived in Flatbush in a very poor family. His father had lost his first wife, so my father was the first son of he and his second wife. And they had several children. After a few months in Altoona, he moved to Brooklyn and lived in Flatbush, not on the upper side. And in fact, a few years later, his father passed, and he ended up the oldest son, the oldest sibling in the family. So even while in high school at Erasmus High, if you're in New York around here, he worked his way through school, odd jobs, finding handouts for food for the family and his younger siblings. And at one point, he had met my mother, and they started dating, and he didn't have much money. So he joined the Army National Guard. That would give him a little extra money and help him better himself and his education. Fast forward a little bit, and Pearl Harbor came along. And within 10 days, Dad was shipped to the West Coast. They were due to be married, and my Irish mother said, damn it, I'm not waiting till the end of the war. So she hopped a train, and she went to California. And she found he was temporarily in Pomona, California, and they got married in St. Joseph's Church in Pomona, California. About a week later, he was shipped down to the docks at Long Beach. They got a little room where she could overlook in the morning. If the ship was still there, and about a week and a half into it, she looked out and he was gone. So Dad was in the Pacific for 4 years. They sent him there because he was a German, and they couldn't trust him in Europe. So he learned Japanese. And he spent 4 years over there, and Mom came back. She worked at the Brooklyn Navy Yard for a while. She helped raise her younger siblings, and she waited for him. And when he returned, they did begin their family together. They had 5 boys, all in perfect order until the last one, who my brothers and I called Oops. Dad got into aerospace and was doing quite well. He had been a custom builder, but that sort of fell apart because of a construction strike. So they had kind of a rough time there for a while. In Long Island, ultimately, around 64, the Defense Department canceled all the contracts looking toward the end of the Vietnam period. And so he was suddenly out of work, and work couldn't be found. And it was 8, 9 months going on unemployment with 5 boys. And Mom said, I always wanted to go back to California. So she said, we're out of here. And they packed up, and Dad, my oldest brother, moved the family out to California. And Mom took the other 4 of us and put us on a Greyhound bus with her. And my first visit to New Mexico was the Albuquerque Greyhound bus terminal. And when I told my friend, I sent a postcard to my friend back home from Albuquerque and had the jackalope on the front. He didn't believe Albuquerque existed, let alone a jackalope. But by the time we got to California, my mom had already started this sort of lifelong school of crafts, of arts and crafts. I mean, you got 5 boys and they're buddies. And it's rained some days. I mean, you had to, and she was very, very talented that way, very creative. And in the civic organizations they worked in, she was always part of the banner committee, the decorating committee. She just had that in her. And I saw early on that she was doing crafts and doing artistic work. And if you pop up I think the very first picture, Eduardo, so that's Dad. That's Dad in the Pacific. I've got that picture on the back. It says, staying strong for you, babe. The thing interesting about that, of course, is most of the pictures and letters we have from him were cut up by censors. Right? And so they're only communication with mail. So it's one reason I have a lot of respect for them. Go ahead to the next. That's them after the war. And good for them, took about 2 or 3 years before they started a family. Keep going. So I wanted to get to this picture. I almost didn't show it. It's not my favorite picture of myself as a kid. I can't explain myself. All I can tell you is I got a baseball bat that I wanted. That's all I can remember about it. It's Christmas time. But I saw it the other day, and I grabbed it because Mom they got a house. This was before the collapse of the defense industry, and Mom had decorated the whole place. And this isn't a great pictorial of it, but this was her living room. Kids were banned from the living room, except on very special occasions. But she decorated everything, and this was actually a textile panel with some framing, and then mounted these sort of, I would call them statuary, I guess, and there were 3 of these across this wall, and then opposite there was a quilt and some other, so she was doing this, at this age, she had all 5 of us under a roof. And so I have to say that, and then when we got to California, what really struck me was when she got a hold of manzanita wood. You know what manzanita is? Grows on the coast. Beautiful, dark, reddish wood. And we'd go out to the beach, and by the time we're going home, she'd have 4 or 5 of these things in the trunk. And she would take them home and clean them all up and give them a clear coat, and then she would tie silk flowers onto them. And they were pieces this large. And she made a side income, which they badly needed, by creating and selling these. So really, when you ask me how I got interested in art, I'd have to say Mom. But what happened was, at 15, when we were so sophisticated, we would get on the Long Island Railroad and go to the subway. There'd be, like, the oldest boy might be 15, 16, the youngest might be 10, and there'd be a group of us, and we'd go in the city, we'd go to museums, all on our own. We'd go to, it was just, you did that then. You wouldn't now, but you did then. And so we were very exposed to all this art. And what happened was, when we moved, I had just finished 8th grade. There was 350 kids in a 7th through 12th grade school. In my new school, the high school, 9th grade, 1,000 kids in my class.
Wow.
So my mom said, you know what, boys, you ought to go to summer school. We got there in May. Kind of get used to the place. I said, okay, it's not real summer school, no, just okay, maybe make some friends. Well, I went in, I said I wanted art. I wanted to be in an art class. And the counselor said, art classes are pretty full, maybe speech. Me being from New York and all. I wasn't from Staten Island, by the way. And I really marked that in my life because it changed my life. It set me on a course of being a nationally competitive speaker and debater. It taught me how to think and how to talk and think at the same time. It taught me to reasonably organize my thoughts, and it caused me to pursue a career in government. And ultimately, I became a consultant in public policy. I would help big agency heads figure out how to comply with rules or how to begin introducing this computer stuff that was growing out of the walls. And it really set the course for my life. And I was always a frustrated artist. But if you go another page or so here, okay, so when I got to DC, what happened, I went to grad school. I was in a doctoral program in political jurisprudence, if you can believe it. I got interested in public policy. I told my advisors I wanted out. I took a master's and went to DC to be a consultant. And I was there about a year or two, and I finally was making good money in a think tank, and some friends of mine and I went to an affordable art auction at the Corcoran Gallery. And I bought 5 pieces. And I still have them all. So this is 2 of them. Sorry for my lousy photography. These are, of course I'll space on it now. These are strips of paper. The New York School, full of color. Yeah, collage, yeah. If you go another one, you'll see a big one here, also from the New York School. This piece is probably about this large. And it's all part of this whole movement at that time. There's 2 others I don't think. One is, I gave you, one is a cool etching of George C. Scott as in Death of the Salesman, Willie Horton. And it was done by Claude Maines, where he was famous for the double pen ink. And the piece is signed by the artist and by George C. Scott with that same pen. So I grabbed that one. And the other one is an actual long listed print of the famous Albert Einstein photo. He's my other hero. So here I was out of grad school making not a lot of money. It was a lot of money to me because I just came out of grad school. But I shot a lot of it on art. And that's sort of, I think what happened then is I kind of fell into expertise in a program that had started at the federal level called the WIC program. And the reason I fell into it is because I'd become so familiar with the Federal Register, and I was working in a nonprofit think tank. They said, why don't we get the Federal Register and Art can read it every day and look for new grants that we can get. So I started reading the Federal Register, and one day here was this opportunity. And we went for it. And it was to spot statistical approaches to fraud and abuse and compliance monitoring in the Women, Infants, and Children's program. So the Women, Infants, and Children's program, briefly, 53% of babies in America today are on the WIC program. That's a good thing. It was co-sponsored by Hubert Humphrey and Bob Dole. And what it does is it gives supplemental food and health counseling and referrals to pregnant women and their children up to age 5. And we estimate that we save $5 in Medicaid costs alone for every dollar we spend on WIC because of healthy birth outcomes. Well, I got lucky. I'm a lucky guy. Became an expert in WIC 7 years after it started. This year is its 50th anniversary. And so WIC gave me a career. It also introduced me to my wife. So one day I'd come through a second time through New Mexico, and that was on a federal project. They wanted me to come talk to the New Mexico WIC folks about what they were doing with their old mainframe beat up computer and when were they going to modernize. And they told me this woman was about to be the new WIC director, and she lived up in Farmington at the time. Well, about a month and a half later, I was at a conference in DC, National WIC, on a coffee line. I turn around, and there's this woman I heard about, and she was cute. And I said, I know who you are. You're Julie Carroll. You're the new WIC director in New Mexico. Scared the Jesus out of the girl. Here's this guy, full beard, long hair, three-piece suit. And here she thought there was like 3 people at the convention knew who the hell she was. So it took me a while, but it brought me around. So we became WIC experts nationally, and we started the company, Burger Carroll and Associates. And what I did want to show you is I didn't get back to art per se, except 2 things happened. I discovered my wife was an art collector. In fact, the first time I went to her home, here was this massive Andrew Wyatt print. I was never seen anything so big. And we started comparing. And over the course of our lives in Santa Fe, we had at one point 300 pieces in our collection. We knew every artist personally. The other thing, if you'll flip a little bit, there should be one more. Oh, I guess not. No. Okay. What I wanted to show you, don't worry about it. A couple of things happened. One, I was inspired by my mother's ability to get back into art when she got to California. She waited until she'd raised all her sons. And at 65, she went to school to start painting. And I brought some of her work. This part of an early show. And then she progressed as she went along, and I have this one in my collection. In fact, the exhibit I had at the gallery is named Trees, Family Trees. So she did this. This is over the first year or 2. And then, as I ended up moving to DC, and every time I'd come home, she'd say, oh, check this out, check this out. Because I was the son who really liked the art. And one day she showed me this one. And so she was like 71 or so. She was in failing health and used to push the wheelchair from the parking lot up the little hill to the studio at the community college. And so then, this is.
Is the best to learn?
Well, when you still learn like this, it goes that way, right? So in my own experience in applying all of these lessons, my wife and I decided that we would have this company and we would not try to grow big or anything, but try to apply our assistance where we can and do it in a creative manner. So we created like 5 different experiential learning games. And that started, and the picture I was looking for was one of them. We used them to teach people how computers work and how government managers could integrate them to their work. And to make them more interesting, I created board games. And so the picture I wanted to show you was a big table, and people would be in teams, and they'd compete through the life cycle of a computer system. And that was such a big hit, I was asked to do a training game for a 2,000-person convention. And I invented another game board, but it was human size. So the team, the 2-person team, would walk the board, and they'd throw dice that were this big. And we had bleachers, and people would cheer them on. And for a while, we just traveled around the country and did that. So I tell you all this because what happened to me was all this was going fine, and then my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And we lost her the month after my son graduated high school. So that sort of shook things up quite a bit. It put us not in a great financial situation. I was all focused on my son. He was getting ready to go to college. He chose tech because at the time his mother was sick and we didn't know what the future would be. So he turned down East Coast offers, pretty close to home, which turned out to be great. Tech's an awesome school. He was published before he left, and he was recruited on full fellowship to Michigan. So like his mother, he got a doctorate. So I'm the one that did. But I found myself, once he went off and the company was kind of struggling, really kind of working out of the house. I had an office in town for a while, and I want to stop for a moment and note that that's when my niece, who you all, if you've been to my gallery, know as Ducky, entered my life, and her husband, my godson, we were running the business and trying to rebuild it from these years of loss. I decided I was kind of over Santa Fe, so I said, you know what, we had a big job in Puerto Rico, so I'm going to move to Puerto Rico. We'd worked for Puerto Rico a lot, and I knew a lot of friends there, so I went and lived on the beach in Puerto Rico, or at least planned to. I got the condo in November. The hurricane followed shortly thereafter, and I didn't get back there until January a year later. And I spent almost a year there. It didn't work. I couldn't do my company, the phones didn't work, the internet didn't work. I learned so much about Caribbean art, about African Caribbean, about the different cultures and the Boricuas and stuff I didn't learn. So everywhere we went, and ultimately in the company, we went to every state and every territory. We went to Asia and Europe doing the consulting work for mommies and babies. We did it for troops overseas. And everywhere we went to museums and we went to studios and we built our collection. So, at some point I find myself, I came back to Santa Fe. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was pandemic. I knew I had to get the heck out of that town. And I started camping out in places like the Gila. And one day, I decided I was going to stay the weekend in TRC rather than rush back home. I'd been here in hot tub, and been at the lake. Didn't really register, except my wife one year dubbed it down by the river down on East Riverside. She called it New Mexicana. And that always stuck with me. So, but the night that we left the Gila with some friends and camped out at Fire Water, and I walk around and it was an art hop. And I said, yeah. That was January 2021. I bought that building in March 2021. And I did that to bring the consulting company, and I called Danielle, Ducky, I said, Ducky, you can't find a good house up there? Come on down here. We'll work the office down here. We move the company down to TRC. You ought to see the client's reaction to that one. And I realized that I could have the company there and I could do a gallery. And part of it, when I opened initially, was a lot of my mother's work and others in my collection. Well, long story short, it's worked out pretty well. What we feel like our major contribution to the town to date in the world of art goes back to that little boy who wanted to take art in summer school. And so I asked the Arts Council, what are we doing for the kids? And they said, well, they can sell their stuff at the county fair. So I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a juried show for 6th through 12th grade kids. And we're going to raise the money, and we're going to have judges, and the judges are going to be artists from the county. And we're going to invite these kids to show us their stuff. You know what I was looking for? I wasn't looking for young artists. The council already has scholarships for kids who are seniors and know they want to go to art school. I was looking for an opportunity for kids in the poorest county in the state to get some self-esteem, to get some affirmation. You looked around the campus, and if you weren't in sports, you weren't a Tiger. The only Tiger shirts were Tiger football, and Tiger basketball, and Tiger this and Tiger that. So we got together, little discussions with Jim Shiley, and we created Tiger Art. And we took that Tiger logo that all the schools use, and we changed it up a little bit. Gave it a funny look with a big blue eye, and then a swatch of red paint. Said they're artists, damn it. And you see kids and you see grown-ups wearing that. We got a call one day not long ago, if you notice the story in the paper, from the School for the Arts in New Mexico. Statewide, legislatively chartered school, free tuition, free lodging and dorms. And they called us and they said, we've got a student here applying from your town. I said, yeah. And she claims she's won 2 times at a juried student show. Yeah. What the heck? Well, they told us that we are the only middle to high school jury art show for students south of Los Lunas. Nobody else in the state. That's why there was a story in the paper. They brought programming down. They wanted to meet the parents and the kids from this school. They did an art class, master art class for the kids. And I understand a couple more kids are looking at the school. Now, we're not trying to steal them from town, but we're establishing this connection that kids in this school who are artists, who want to be artists, have a possible path. More importantly, these kids, when you go to the judging event, which is Saturday morning the 19th, and you see the artists walking around talking to the kids, and the artist says, the judge says, well, that's interesting. What were you going for here? What made you think of this? You see the look on these kids' faces. Nobody asks them questions like that. Adults don't engage them that way. And the transformation is starting. 2 things I got to tell you. One is we need judges. People in the art community. We need judges. Number 2, we have been very successful for 3 years straight. We've raised roughly $7,000 every year. We give out $4,600 of it in cash. Last year, and the kids pay nothing for the show and nothing to sell. Last year, every kid who had a piece for sale, because some kids come in with 2 or 3 pieces and mom says, oh no, they're not going nowhere, right? They're mine. So you'll see not for sale. Every kid who had a piece for sale last year sold a piece of work at the show or in the gallery that month. Every kid. So now kids got something to be proud of. Well, what happened this year is we had 2 things happen. We always said we had to finish our fundraising for the student show before Fiesta got started. Because once Fiesta starts fundraising, this year it's 75th anniversary. Wonderful. So Fiesta started early. So we're way behind. On top of that, this Rock and Gem show was pushed back on the calendar. So now we're right up against them too. So we're at about 2/3 of what we need. And so I'm asking everyone in the room here to do your best and ask around, talk to people and organizations you're in. We need probably about another $2,000–3,000 to be saved. The good news, we got the best middle school art teacher this town's ever seen. Yeah. And I gotta tell you, you wanna be a judge, be a middle school judge. That's gonna blow your mind. So we learned that we could up their self-esteem. We could make life have a better outlook. And some of them, their parents and the kids are walking around school and town wearing those Tiger Heart t-shirts. That I feel like is a real contribution and something we can be very proud of. But it's really just the beginning. And what we discovered and didn't know, the talent of these kids is mind-blowing. Come by the gallery sometime. I'll show you what I show people walking up the street. I said, check this out. Wow, I said, what grade do you think this was? How about 7th grade? People think it's an adult. I mean, this town is full of art and talent, and I'm hoping the student art show is really just the beginning of an engagement with our youth. So, Arts Council, I'm going to push you to have a youth wing, if you will, an arm that focuses on it. Yes, you're co-sponsors, by the way, of the art show, and I appreciate the council did just step up. We would have been a lot better off if we hadn't just gotten a contribution from the council. So, but I want to go further. We're going to have an area of our gallery where we feature young student art, kids who just graduated. In our gallery, we took one of the pieces of last year's winner, who was a junior, by the way, she'll be back this year. And she made a Tiger I had the tiger image that's amazing, so we created it into a t-shirt so that these kids can have sort of learn how to have follow-on revenue. I'll end with this. At the very first show, some grumpy old fart, excuse the French, asked me why the hell I would give the lowest prize of the show, $50, to a third place sixth grader. And I asked him if they'd ever tried to buy art supplies. So we're a poor county, and we feel like we landed in a great place. We were able to meet a lot of people. We've been able to affect lives in a way I could not have done in my 33 years in Santa Fe. Not a chance. So when I say I don't regret it, this isn't a little town that's struggling. This is a town that's growing. It's expanding. It's fertilizing. And it's a wonderful opportunity because each one of you can have an impact in this town. And that's how I became an art gallery guy. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we end, does anyone have any questions for Art specifically?
I got my hand up.
Oh, right over there.
Let me stand up so you see.
I could sit down.
Yeah. When is this show?
Thank you. It's the 18th and 19th. So it opens Friday evening of April.
April, okay. I was trying to find them.
Opens Friday evening, April the 18th, and then all day Saturday. But the judging is in the morning, and the awards start around noon.
Okay.
On the 18th or?
On the 19th, Saturday the 19th. So it's open all day Saturday the 19th. And we need not just judges, we need some volunteers. In fact, speaking of calendars being pushed, Rebecca Dow approached us, and we did a little trade with her. She's trying to find
Francis.
I'm sorry, not
Francis.
Rebecca, Francis. Francis Luna. They are going to try to get the schools to loan us some displays. Our displays that we built got wrecked out at the county grounds. So we're displayless. Other questions, comments, thoughts?
When do you need the donations by? When you try to close those out by?
Well, we haven't, like for example, we haven't been doing the advertising we need to do. And the advertising not only draws attention and participation, but it also raises money. So sooner the better, I would say.